Next thing on the podcast today is the top tips, both SatMap and Garmin. So, Andy, straight over to you for your Garmin top tip.
Yeah, so my Garmin tip for today, we're talking about some of these new generation units like the Touch 25 and 35. Now, those units come with this European Topo Active mapping that Garmin do, which we often find is a great map when you're in an urban environment. And we've also talked about bird's eye vouchers, downloading Ordnance Survey mapping. Now, if you buy a unit, a Garmin unit, and you actually buy it with one of the map cards installed in the unit, so this is a micro SD card in the back of the unit, which could be the 1 to 50, or we've talked about the 1 to 25 options. The way the Garmin GPS device works, it'll always read and display the maps on the screen of your GPS that are on the micro SD card first. So I often get a lot of calls from customers saying they've either downloaded the Bird's Eye Select mapping, using the Bird's Eye Select voucher, downloaded the Ordnance Survey Bird's Eye 1 to 25 mapping, or they want to view this Topo Active mapping that's on the memory of things like the Etrex Touch 25 and 35, and they're still only seeing the mapping that's on the map card in the unit. What you actually have to do is go into the settings on your unit. So you basically go into Setup, Maps, and you either use the Configure Maps or the map information, depending on what unit you've got. So you go Setup, Map, and you'll see either Configure Maps or Map Information, and that'll give you a list of the maps installed on the unit. And what you're looking for is the one that you've got on your micro SD card. So for example, it could be the GB Discoverer 1 to 50 map, and you touch on it or select it and you select Disable. As soon as you disable the map that's on the micro SD card, you then see any maps that are on the memory of the unit, which could either be the Ordnance Survey that you've downloaded using the Bird's Eye voucher or this Topo Active mapping. So it's not a case of having to remove your micro SD card to see that mapping. You just disable. And what you've got to remember, when you then come out of the area, say where you've downloaded your Bird's Eye map, or an area where you don't want to see that lesser detailed Topo Active map in an urban environment, remember to go back into Setup, Map, and either Map Information or Configure Maps and re-enable the maps that's on your map card.
That's brilliant. That's a good one. Now, I know the SatMap top tip has come from a question from a customer this week. They said, what is this hibernation function for? And we went, what? We've never really looked at this before. Yeah. And you could have got into actually, I can see a use for this hibernation function.
Whether you've got a SatMap, you know, the Active 12 or the Active 20, I don't know if you've noticed, when you press the power button and release it to turn the unit off, you get a screen that gives you some options of hibernate for 1 hour, 2 hour, and I think it's 4 hours, isn't it, Ross?
Used to go up to about 10 hours for the Active 12.
Yeah, I think on the Active 20 it's 1, 2 and 4. Now, the way we see this hibernate, so you've got your unit turned on, you turn your SatMap on, you wait for your high resolution maps to load. Now, to be honest, on the new Active 20, the maps load really quickly. The Active 12 was a little bit slower to load. So you've got your unit on, you're on a walk now or on a cycle ride, and you're going to stop for a long break. To be honest, with the big batteries, I've never thought about, well, you've got to turn it off, you know, to save battery. But what you can do, especially if you stop for a nice lunch break and you found a lovely pub to go into and have a pub lunch, and you go inside a building, one of the worst things with a GPS device is when it's left turned on and you're inside a building, the unit's fighting to try and find a satellite signal because it hasn't got a clear view of the sky, and that's what can pull your battery down. And rather than turn the unit off and then when you get back outside you've got to wait that couple of minutes for the unit to boot up, what you can do, if you press and release the on-off button and select one of these hibernate modes. So I don't know, if you were stopping for your lunch and it was maybe going to be that long, we might be here for an hour, you could pick the hibernate 2 hours. It doesn't matter that you're not going to, it doesn't mean you have to stop for 2 hours. So you select the hibernate 2 hours, the screen goes off and it turns some of the functions off in the unit, but it's actually still booted on in the background. It's not going to record anymore where you walk. You've got to remember that it loses the satellite signal, screen goes off, but that really helps save battery. But the beauty is when you come out of that, you know, nice pub that you've maybe went in for your pub lunch or where you've stopped for your break, you simply press in the on-off button once and the unit comes back on. And that's it, the unit's now back on instantly, gets a satellite signal really quick, and you're not having to wait for the unit to boot up. So we really like, you know, since I've now thought about that function a little bit more and why I might use it, I think it's a great function on the Active 12 and the Active 20.
Going back to talking about the history, one of the reasons they put the hibernate function on there was to maximise the battery life for as long as possible. So I think originally it maybe lasted about 120 hours with the hibernate function on. But one of the big things based on your tip to just mention is if you do forget to turn it back on after your lunch break, maybe you had one too many beers with your lunch, but if you forget to switch it back on, it will still track your route when you switch it back on, but it will only draw a straight line between where you hibernated it and where you remembered to take it back off. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
So that's brilliant. So that's the top tips. So one other thing to mention, the top tips. One thing we started last week and we're doing it again this week is we've started with top tips in the online resource. We've started doing video top tips. So in our weekly newsletter, we used to put a little top tip down the bottom. We kind of thought, how do we move this on? We've started doing video top tips, but we've put them in the online resource. We're going to talk about the next story about the online resource. But again, log into our online resource, and if you look for Garmin or SatMap, you'll see the bottom story now is top tips, and you can log into there. And every week we're adding a new top tip. So these are the things that I'm covering in the podcast as well.